All right. I know, it's like kind of. All right, Commissioner, are you ready to go? Thank you again for your patience. Before you do that, colleagues, I'll just let you know we're on page, looks like 219 in the budget book. So Commissioner Wiggins, I will turn it over to you to introduce your team and get us going.
So good morning, Chairman Wan, President Shipman, and council members. Thank you again for the opportunity to present DPW's FY24 proposed budget. With me, I have to my immediate left is Deputy Commissioner Keith Robinson. To my far left, we have Ms. Melissa Davis, who serves as our Finance Director. To my immediate right, I have Deputy Commissioner New Salsavith. And to my far right, I have Ms. Kanika Greenlee.
Commissioner, I'm going to interrupt for just 1 second. Did y'all happen to bring copies of the presentation? Okay, that's all right. Well, do we have an electronic copy? Okay, all right. Please proceed. We'll just follow.
I apologize.
Thank you.
And we have a few of our colleagues in the audience today. They may be returning from escorting some of those silver shirts out of the room. Okay, so this morning I'll provide an overview of the department and our accomplishments from fiscal year 2023. Hopefully today's presentation will provide you with an overview of how DPW supports and advances each of Mayor Dickens' 4 management pillars. Mayor Dickens has set out to make critical investments necessary to ensure the residents across Atlanta benefit from best-in-class service, delivery in a safe environment focused on inclusivity and prosperity. Public Works has created partnerships and invested in technical resources that will fully digitize our operations and will ultimately allow us to better navigate and serve our residents. We can move on to slide 2 of the presentation. Here you will see our vision to ensure environmental compliance. There we go. You'll see our vision to ensure environmental compliance, good working relationships, and high standards and professional management for the City of Atlanta. Our mission is simple. You see, we have a lot of wording here, but to summarize it, we will be where we say we will be, do what we say we will do in the time that we've committed to doing whatever we've promised. So the Department of Public Works has 3 core functions, led by the Commissioner's Office, which provides administrative leadership, strategic planning, and overall support of DPW in these 3 critical areas. Solid Waste Services is responsible for the collection and disposal management of solid waste for residents within the City of Atlanta. We also manage the city's recycling program and provide post-closure care for foreclosed landfills. This year, the department separated common goods services and created the Office of Special Services, which is funded by the general fund. These services in street sweeping and cleaning, right-of-way mowing and cleaning, dead animal removal, combating illegal dumping, litter education and enforcement, facilitating the Keep Atlanta Beautiful Commission program, storm debris removal, and assisting with special events and emergency operations. We also have the Office of Fleet Services, which is responsible for the acquisition, maintenance, and disposal of the City of Atlanta's motorized equipment fleet of a little bit over 4,300 units. We also have nearly 2,000 associated pieces of equipment for a total of a little bit over 6,200 pieces of equipment. This office is also responsible for purchasing and dispensing of over 3 million gallons of fuel annually. The next slide, you will see our org chart. Further outlines the previous slide. Let's move on to our FY23 highlights. We tried to categorize each of our highlights under the mayor's management pillars. So under One Safe City, one of our major initiatives is combating illegal dumping. We partnered with the Solicitor's Office to prosecute illegal dumping cases by adding 2 illegal dumping investigators. These investigators will investigate the most egregious illegal dumping crimes Although our code enforcement team, also known as SWEET, the Solid Waste Education and Enforcement Team, will still be involved in investigating illegal dumping crimes, our partnership with the Solicitor's Office will hopefully yield arrest for, again, some of the more egregious crimes that involve things like the illegal dumping of hazardous waste or the dumping of materials that exceed a certain capacity that would basically constitute a felony. That program does fall under Operation Clean Sweep, which is basically a proactive program just designed to ensure that the city has a uniform appearance throughout. Our team conducts quarterly inspections of our major thoroughfares and the collector streets and assign a score based on the appearance of those streets to determine how to properly allocate our resources to the most critical areas. Under One Safe City, again, we have our fleet maintenance endeavors. Under the leadership of our recently hired director, Mr. Mims, we've been able to maintain a 91% vehicle availability. Ideally, our goal is 100%, but we have made some significant improvements. At one point, we were hovering in the low 80% area. We have also aggressively sourced about 355 vehicles for APD. These are support vehicles, pursuit vehicles. Nationwide, there is a shortage of vehicles, and I would like to thank my team for scouring every lot, every dealership, any partnership that we could leverage to get these 355 vehicles is the equivalent of mining gold at this point. Under effective and ethical government, we have implemented a telematics software. This software will aid in our day-to-day operations involving curbside collections and our right-of-way maintenance endeavors. This software was recently onboarded maybe about 3 weeks ago. We're still in the sandbox environment. We're still working through some glitches, and I just ask for your patience as we home in this software program. I've just had a discussion with Councilmember Norwood about some missed yard debris collections that is taking place in the Buckhead area. I just would like to ask the council again for their patience as we transition from a system that is completely paper-based. In the past, we didn't have maps to properly navigate through our assigned routes. So again, this is another great step to allow us to be able to use technology and innovation to address those problems. This software will also help us to document customer service history so we can identify ongoing issues or issues that are repetitive, such as vehicles that are blocking our path to collection routes, or maybe a resident that may have had a late set out because they're not as familiar with the collection schedule. So again, this is another tool in our arsenal to be able to provide timely and efficient services. Next slide, please. So under a city built for the future, we are working with the Mayor's Office of Resilience to work towards our goal of 20% electrification of our vehicles citywide. This is a very ambitious endeavor. The Department of Public Works has purchased 2 vehicles towards that endeavor, and we are scheduled to purchase many more through our partnership with departments such as the Atlanta Department of Transportation, the Atlanta Department of Watershed Management as well, but our goal to transition from the traditional combustion engine to electric vehicles is an important endeavor as we also upgrade the infrastructure for our charging stations as well. Onto our automated side loaders. This is our attempt to automate the collection process for our curbside collection program. I've had various discussions with, in particular, the CUC committee about the dangers of curbside collections. The ergonomics for this job is brutal. Our folks not only have to, deal with just the physical demands of the job, They also have to perform this work in inclement weather and, quite frankly, on some roadways that are very busy and challenging to navigate on the back of a truck. So our goal is to make sure that these automated trucks are used in these type of environments to reduce any type of exposure or unnecessary harm to our team members. Just for context, these trucks are operated by a single operator. It uses a mechanical arm to pick up the cans and place the materials into a truck. Our standard configuration of a crew, of a collection crew, is a 3-member crew. This includes 1 driver and 2 collectors on the back of the truck. So not only will this provide more efficient services, it allows us to place the cans exactly where we collected them. That will help to reduce some complaints about misplaced cans. It will reduce the amount of workers' comp injuries. And so this would have been a great tool for us to have while we were in we dealt with our challenges while we were in the COVID posture. So again, we're moving towards fully implementing the automated side loaders. I believe in another slide, we addressed the study that shows the percentage of the city that can be canvassed through the use of these automated side loaded trucks. As many of you know, we recently unveiled our DPW Command Center, which is basically the heartbeat of DPW. From the Command Center, we are able to look at our day-to-day activities in real-time footage. Again, through the telematics software program that we're onboarding, we're able to look at our mobile surveillance cameras used to combat illegal dumping. We will also be able to use the Command Center to receive signals from our automated smart sensor trash cans that will provide a notification to the Command Center when these cans reach full capacity. Another project that I am very proud of is that the team stood up a vendor scorecard. This vendor scorecard is used to score the work that's done by our vendors. In particular, our right-of-way maintenance and landscape providers are evaluated on a daily basis. We try to evaluate approximately 80% of the work that's done as far as the mowing and the litter management of the right-of-way that's done by our contracted providers. The vendor scorecard has been a very good tool to interact with those providers. Again, they receive a passing or failing score upon each inspection, which has really revealed some opportunities for us to really step up the level of work that's being done by our contractors. Not only are we scoring the work that's being done by the contractors, we are also scoring the work that's being done by our full-time staff members as well. This vendor scorecard is integrated into a mobile application that was completed by our staff in partnership with AIM. And the vendors have the ability to log into this mobile app and to see what their daily score is. And we also use this vendor scorecard to have quarterly touch points with the vendors to give them an idea of how they are performing. This is also a tool that we can use if we have a vendor that consistently fails to meet our standards as we bid out additional work. Moving on to the next slide. Okay, this slide, you will find a summary of our operations. DPW reallocated staff to the general fund, which explains roughly an $8 million variance that was transferred from the solid waste fund to the general account fund. Should you have any questions about that $8 million variance, that's where that shift occurred. The solid waste services revenue fund occurred approximately a $7 million revenue shortfall. We're engaging a firm called Stearns, Conrad and Schmidt to provide DPW with a cost and efficiency study, which will provide better insight into the true cost for providing day-to-day services. We anticipate the results of the cost efficiency study by the end of December to create a 5-year plan for the street-based sanitary service and common good sanitary services. This will allow the department to plan for a long-term capital plan and determine true operational costs and revenue sufficiency. Moving on to the next slide. So here you'll find an overall snapshot of changes to the department's budget. I will share more details by operational area in the next few slides. Next slide, please. So as you know, the Solid Waste Services is an enterprise fund based on a fee-for-service. Core business areas are collection services to include garbage, multifamily, backyard recycling, and yard trimming. The department is also responsible for the city's 4 closed landfills: Key Road, Cascade Road, East Confederate, and Gun Club Road. In accordance with the consent order with the state of Georgia, we must maintain these deactivated landfills. There was a relocation of about 100 staff members to the general fund to support special services, which is shown on the next slide. The $9.2 million in contracted services covers our core services. Next year, we also plan to address some of the department's infrastructure needs based on Dean's assessment of DPW's facilities. Next slide, please. All right, so again, under operations by major categories, I'll go over the operational areas of special services. What I've found is that there has been some confusion about the services that are provided by DPW since the bifurcation of services between ADOT and DPW. So under the category of special services, we have administrative services. The Keep Atlanta Beautiful Commission falls under special services, our right-of-way maintenance division, our illegal dumping investigations, our solid waste public education team, also known as SWEEP, our legal sign removal activities, our lot clearing activities, street cleaning, special event cleanup, trash receptacle collections, and that's primarily on public right-of-ways. So anything that provides services for the common good of all citizens falls under the Special Services Division. Based on the 2022 Solid Waste Sanitary Services Rate Study, the department created new operational areas in fiscal year 2023. These general fund special services listed on the left side of the slide provide a benefit to both residents and businesses in the city of Atlanta. Okay, moving on to the next slide. It may seem a little strange that we have a wastewater slide, but this is due to our partnership with the Department of Watershed Management. We have a memorandum of understanding where we will street roads, particularly in the combined sewer areas, in accordance with the federal consent decree. On average, we sweep about 240 miles a month to meet our regulatory requirement of sweeping approximately 360 miles of street every 6 weeks. Again, that 240 miles is the minimum, and so is the 360 miles. Oftentimes, we exceed that threshold. Next slide, please. Okay, moving on to fleet services. Their operation areas are fleet administration and fleet operations. As I mentioned earlier, we recently hired a director of fleet services. He's doing a great job of transitioning our team, particularly in the thought process of implementing technology and innovation to solve some of our issues. We certainly aren't where we want to be, but again, we're seeing significant progress under Mr. Mims' leadership. The team is also working to develop a vehicle replacement program to establish a comprehensive 5-year program to prioritize needs, to standardize the fleet composition. And what we mean by that is that we have an array of vehicles, and the goal is to standardize the vehicles that we have, whether it's an SUV that may be an Explorer, or a passenger vehicle that may be a Ford Fusion, just for the sake of an example. Our challenge has been when we order various vehicles, it requires a different level of skill sets for those mechanics, and the familiarization of the equipment will allow them to repair the equipment much quicker. We're also looking to modernize the fleet to control our overall operations and maintenance costs. All right, moving on to the next slide. Our FY24 priorities. Under the Keep Atlanta Beautiful Commission, we will increase our education and outreach initiatives this year. We will also increase our cooperative engagement, and we anticipate expanding our volunteer engagement as well. The Keep Atlanta Beautiful Commission will be the premier Keep America Beautiful affiliate in the Southeast. We'll start with the Southeast, but in the nation over the next 2 years. We're looking to aggressively grow our programs and to promote environmental stewardship as well under Ms. Greenlee's leadership. Under street-based and common goods study, we're looking to prepare a 5-year plan for our solid waste rate adjustments, as we just discussed. We're looking to address our long-term capital needs as well. And we will also prepare a cost of services analysis. Under our citywide vehicle replacement plan, our goal is to make sure that all of our vehicles are replaced within a 5-year cycle. So it's important that once we establish the budget to start that process, that there aren't any interruptions. The challenge that comes out of any type of interruption with a planned fleet replacement plan is that the total cost of ownership of those vehicles begin to exceed the value of the vehicle. And once you fall out of synchronization of replacing those vehicles, the upfront capital cost increases. So it's very important that we maintain the schedule of our vehicle replacement plans. Last but certainly not least, we're looking to leverage artificial intelligence for our day-to-day activities to collect real-time and automated insights on the status of our infrastructure and to use the technology to collect, process road debris and trash bins, et cetera. So we're looking to use this technology to score the condition of our roads. We perform this process manually currently on a quarterly basis. By implementing technology that can be installed on our vehicles, we will be able to have minute-by-minute scoring capabilities, really to determine where the greatest need is to deploy our resources. Again, another objective to, we're always looking to build a better mousetrap. We're always looking to reduce the amount of unnecessary touches. We're always looking to manage our assets in the most efficient way as well. I believe this concludes our presentation, but last but certainly not least, I would like to thank the Mayor's Office for their continued support of our efforts to restructure DPW under approach using innovation and technology at the forefront of all we do. And most importantly, I would like to give a huge shout out to the women and men of the Department of Public Works who work tirelessly. I often say they're the unseen, the unsung heroes who are out working while we're in the comfort of our climate control homes or we're sleeping in our beds at night. And so I just would like to say thank you, thank you, thank you again. Thank you to Ms. Davis, our finance director, who worked tirelessly to put our budget together. And we are ready and available to address any questions should you have any at this time.
All right, thank you, Commissioner. Colleagues, we'll open it up for questions. I've got a queue already started with Councilmember Hillis, followed by Norwood, Lewis, Shipman, and Winston.
Thank you, Chairman One. Thank you, Commissioner Wiggins and your team. I don't know where to start. First, I guess I'll start with, and I know some of this is likely the issue that unfortunately we find ourselves back at again. You know, this is my 6th budget presentation, and every one is, you know, we've had so many millions of dollars of shortfall in the solid waste revenue bucket. But we were told, you know, there's a grand plan, and, you know, DPW is not even fixing it. It's such an issue. The law department's going to fix it, and we've brought in an outside consultant. But I'll come back to that in a minute. So the first thing I'd like to understand, and I have it spelled out here in black and white and red, but I would ask finance to walk me through these adjustments between the general fund and the solid waste services fund, especially when it comes to the significant large reductions in each of the funds. I'm talking, $2 million from salaries, almost $8 million from purchase and contracted services, which leads to an overall reduction in almost $8 million in between these two funds.
So what you're looking at is the roll-up of the entire Public Works Department. If you look to page 224, that page has the general fund allocation to Public Works. That allocation increased from last year from 20 million to 20, a little bit more than 20 million, but that is essentially when you pass the legislation for the 0.67 mils that is dedicated to Public Works for their shared services. So that portion's in there. That's the general fund contribution from the budget that's in front of us, paper that's in front of us. The other component that you see in the solid waste revenue fund is that enterprise revenue, and those funds have to be set by the revenue projection for the year. So last year, when we adopted the solid waste revenues, we anticipated a revenue of $60 million. This year, we are projecting and anticipating a revenue of $53 million for FY24. That is based on the actual collections that we are seeing in fiscal year 23. If you recall in your quarterly report, that was highlighted as well, that we anticipate the end of fiscal year 23 to have solid waste revenues of $53 million. So it's a function of what's actually happening out there. It's a function of what was billed and what is collected. Part of our responsibility and part of the Budget Commission report is to anticipate revenues based on the actuals that are happening on the ground. So the bills that are going to go out for FY24 to solid waste services will yield an anticipation of $53 million.
So I guess the larger question, and maybe either you or Law can answer this, is why are we back in the same position? We were told that, this is outside of solid waste scope. We're going to actually hit the nail on the head this time, and Law is going to bring in a consultant to tell us right where we need to be. So why are we still, and I'm not talking about a 2 to 5% variance. This is a 15% variance into what the study told us we needed to bill and collect versus what we actually have. We're continuing to rob money from the general fund to pay for solid waste services. So why are we here again, and what are we doing this coming fiscal year to correct it? Are we increasing solid waste bills by 15%, or what's going on?
There's not a anticipation to increase bills for this fiscal year, and I'll let Commissioner Wiggins speak a little bit more into the consulting services that they have in place to bring in front of City Council about what the appropriate rate structure should be. The rates that were passed and passed by Council were set for 2 years with the anticipation of coming back for a more enhanced structure that can look at many different models for revenue collection and setting rates. And they're going through that process right now. And to answer your question, the consultant study that was done is always done with a layer of assumptions that are baked into place. Those assumptions are detailed enough, but it's hard to get visibility into them until you actually construct a billing file that goes out and bills based on all of the data that was put in place. So as of the third quarter, when we saw that there could be a shortfall in the revenues, it wouldn't be prudent to go into FY24 and just pick a number that it was the same as last year, because we'll be back in the same position again.
And I don't know if, I don't know if Commissioner Wiggins is the person to answer this question for the 15% variance in what we were told we needed to do versus what we collected. I mean, he didn't hire that consultant. Law hired that consultant. So why the huge delta exactly? Did we bill what we needed to bill and we just didn't collect, or what's the big
So
issue?
while Law did hire the consultant relied heavily on information that was provided from the city, so worked closely with the departments to make sure that they're building the case based on all of the information and data that was given to construct a rate model that was constructed at that time. I mean, I think that answers that question. To be quite frank, you know, we in finance can only go off of what we see in actuals that are happening and what we record from the revenue anticipations as we collect them. So our part as fiduciaries is to see what is actually happening and give advisement to the departments, administration, and council based on the actual data that's happening. We don't construct the rates, we don't set the rates. We provide insight as to what they should be based on the best information that we have in front of us.
So Councilmember Hillis, if I might add, that study was done over a period of time that really did not allow them to get a full snapshot of our day-to-day operations. There are some seasonal activities and some things that may occur outside of that particular time. So given the time that they had to complete the study, it did not allow them to experience some off-season activities, if you will. I would like to go back to the telematics software program again. That program allows us to get better insight on the amount of households that we're collecting on a daily basis. As you know, there's pretty much a flat fee that's instituted for solid waste collections. We haven't considered the collection of additional cans. It's difficult at times to understand the cost of bulk pickup. We've also had a rate increase as far as our tonnage that was commensurate with the water and sewer index, the CPI. So the cost and efficiency study hopefully will be able to give us a better understanding of what the true cost is for us to perform day-to-day services. I understand your question is more geared towards revenue projections, I believe, but there is a direct correlation of revenue collections and the actual cost of the services that we provide. We also purchased some equipment, capital equipment, garbage trucks that were needed, quite frankly, because the trucks that we had were failing. We did have a set amount of trucks that we needed to purchase, but we needed to exceed that amount because the availability of garbage trucks are so scarce that when we sourced these trucks, we had to purchase them while we had the capability of doing that. And I know that doesn't equate to such a huge variance. What I'm trying to say is there are other things that contributed to this delta, as you mentioned, between the cost of providing these services and the revenue that we're collecting.
So tell me more about what is this, you went over it briefly, hopefully that will, after 6 years of enduring this and longer for my other colleagues that have been up here, this 5-year plan for solid waste rate adjustments, what is that? Are we going to continue to look at this year over year so we're not robbing millions of dollars from the general fund every year, or?
That is the exact goal of the plan, is to take a look 5 years from today to understand what those costs will be, making some predictions based on things like the consumer price index, the rising cost of fuel, vehicles. The other thing that we have not been able to add into the equation until we engage the firm that will conduct the study is the reduction of the traditional collection routes that we have through the use of the traditional garbage truck. As we transition to the automated side-loaded trucks, we will reduce the size of each crew by 66%. And the 66% reduction comes from having a three-person crew by going to a single driver. But there is a cost to achieve that goal by purchasing the capital equipment to reduce the amount of staff members as well. So to save money, we have to spend a little money up front.
So moving on from the solid waste fee debacle that hopefully we solve by the next year I'm sitting right here. What accounts for the large reduction in purchase and contracted services? Because I know we are still using purchase and contracted services to collect yard waste, to trim our right-of-ways. I mean, I would love for that to be in-house.
Right.
But my understanding is those services, at least at this time, are still needed given your staffing level. So why the $12 million reduction in that?
So as we begin to identify areas where we can self-perform services, at one point we were having challenges with competing with the private sector as far as their overall unit costs for performing work. One example I would give you is our bulk pickup service. At one point during COVID, we were heavily using an outside firm to collect bulk waste. And not only have we reduced the amount of time that the outside provider was responding to bulk waste requests, we have reduced the actual cost of providing that service as well. So that is a significant chunk of the reduction in contracted services. We've also slightly reduced some of our contracted services as it relates to our curbside collections programs. I don't have an itemized detail of each of the contractors that are involved. While we were in an emergency posture, we also exhausted a few POs, which forced us to self-perform work as well, which related to the reduction. But I will defer to Director Davis if she had any additional input on the reduction of those services.
Councilmember Hillis, one of the main drivers for the variance with the purchase and contracted services during the budget development for 2023, the $20 million was placed in a holding account until we were able to work with the Department of Finance and the Department of Human Resources to create those new departments and special services. Since then, since the departments have been created, we have reallocated those $20 million across all of the appropriate departments. So that is the primary explanation for the $11 million variance.
Gotcha. And then kind of going back overall, looking at your general fund budget, you're basically staying where you were last year. I mean, you're getting a massive $37,000 increase. And just going to your mission statement. Now, there's things in there to enhance the quality of life by providing environmentally safe protections for the welfare of its citizens, livable, walkable, green, and sustainable communities, adherence to policies, goals, and objectives that achieve the mayor's vision for the city of Atlanta. How are we improving, or as what the word used in your mission statement, enhancing quality of life for our citizens when over the past year we've had issues getting streets swept? We had a conversation last week about that. We've had issues getting our right-of-ways cleaned, and we continue to get complaints.
bit last week was the first time we're in that sandbox environment. And obviously with our street sweepers, I believe that's coming fairly soon too, to add that as well too. So some of those efficiencies that we'll gain, we believe that will actually, help the department, maintain its, within that budget. Kind of like what Commissioner Wiggins mentioned, before we ask, we want to make sure that we're doing our part as well too.
And one of the things I failed to mention, in addition to the technology that we're implementing, we have a data team that we're beginning to collect data, looking at our SLAs, looking at our performance measures, and we are seeing improvements without injection into our budget. So again, the data team has been in place for a short period of time. It has not been a full 12 months. So that data, although we're seeing a rise in productivity, we still see that information as somewhat inconclusive. We just respectfully ask that we have, a full 12 months with our data team to make the right decisions, that we have the appropriate amount of time to onboard the software program, to be able to collect the necessary data, to really put data behind the request of asking for additional funding if needed.
Just a few quick follow-up questions. What is the plan for the automated side loader rollout? I mean, I know we have some out right now, but
Right.
when will fully roll those out? I just bring this up because there's a debate in my neighborhood right now. I guess the manual loaders are hardworking employees of Public Works. They want the handles out, but then of course when the side loaders come, handles need to be facing the house so those side loaders can pick those up. So whenever it is, and maybe even now, because I know sometimes, just looking at my neighborhood, sometimes it's the full crew, sometimes it's the side loaders for recycling. So there needs to be, a public information campaign when we fully go to those, and going back to our conversation last week, when we start charging for those extra bins, collections, et cetera, that, there needs to be a public information campaign that goes out when these changes come.
So, Councilmember Hillis, you are correct. We will have to have an aggressive public education program to explain the proper placement of the carts. We will have to certainly work with public safety to identify areas where on-street parking may restrict the use of the automated side loader trucks. To, just for an example, we may need to restrict parking to a certain side of the road. But yes, Ms. Greenlee and her team are prepared. They led the study to determine the percentage of the city that could be canvassed through the use of the automated side loader trucks, which is approximately 88%. The remaining 12% is due to narrow roads. We have some areas in like the Cabbagetown area where the roads predate the vehicle. We have also identified other automated trucks that may be able to be used in that area, but you're absolutely correct. But to address your question, when do we plan on rolling out the automated side loader trucks? We are purchasing the trucks as they are available. We're working closely with two major manufacturers of the automated side loader trucks. We've been very successful in getting at the top of their list for the availability of trucks. Our strategy is to deploy those trucks in areas, again, where there are major thoroughfares to prevent any unnecessary exposure to vehicular traffic with our workers. And you mentioned earlier that you've seen trucks where sometimes an automated side loader truck is being used and sometimes a traditional truck is being used. That has been due to our challenges with the age of our fleet. I think that I know that we have gotten to a level to where the average age of our fleet has been reduced significantly, although there are more purchases to be made. we can only purchase the amount of inventory that's available is the challenge. And, beginning our processes with an end in mind, we have passed up opportunities to purchase rear loader vehicles because of our efforts to automate some of the routes. So it does come with some costs with patching up some of our existing vehicles, but it certainly will put us further away from our automation goal if we begin to purchase additional traditional rear loader trucks.
And last quick question, you may have touched on this a little bit, but the timeline for the, may have already been commenced, but commencement and completion of the study?
So we are scheduled to meet with the engineering firm within the next 30 days, I believe. And we anticipate that we will have enough data to begin making operational changes by the conclusion of this year. But we're asking for the firm that's conducting the study within the first 30 days to give us their initial assessment as far as items that we have asked outside, or in addition to what the council has asked. We have asked the firm to help us to identify other areas of solid waste that would provide more revenue collection opportunities and retain earnings as well. So the very short answer to your question is by the conclusion of this year, we hope that we will have a completed study, or at least 85 to 90% of that study completed. But we're confident that we will have the information that we need before the preparation of the FY25 budget cycle.
All right, that's all I have for now, Mr. Chair.
Yes, I wanted to just ask y'all, I had mentioned before about the terrible traffic that we have on our commuter streets, which is, a transportation problem, not your problem. But I am very concerned about your workers, because what happens on my street, where there are 15,000 cars a day, is it is not people with a Fulton County tag. It is out-of-state tags, it's paper tags, it's blackened windows, it's blackened tags, and they are running around your trucks and scaring me to death that one of your guys is going to get hurt. So as you're looking at these side loaders, the streets where there is an inordinate amount of traffic and an inordinate amount of commuters determined to get to work who do not care that your guys are out there doing a fabulous job for us, picking up the trash, picking up the recyclings. It's scary. So if you could, first public relations campaign, and I talked with some of the administration, not your department, but some of the administration a while ago, and said, let's have a public relations campaign that says, stop for the garbage truck. Stop. They are crossing the street. They don't deserve to be in fear of their lives when they're doing that. And let's get signage out there, because it is really rude, horrible, and scary what your guys are enduring. So I'd love to see that. And if that means that those streets get first dibs wherever they are in the city, but the ones that your workers are most concerned about, and I'm sure they can tell you, because there's some streets in my own neighborhood that they wouldn't be concerned at all. And there are others that they're going, oh my God, I got to get off the truck. Yes. And there are a half a dozen cars that are just hysterical. Next thing is and this is just very different. But we know illegal dumping. We know we have lots that are vacant lots and that y'all have to clear. And we know that we've got homeless encampments that are just nasty. So my question is can y'all get with, between your sweet team and PAD and the solicitor's office, the court system, I would get the homeless guys, as they're getting ready to leave in the morning, get them to clean up. Now, that isn't going to be easy, but there is no reason for us to see all of these places and for your guys to have to go out there and clean up after bad behavior. So it seems to me that if we got PAD that tries to get people to leave that encampment, maybe they'll do it if they can't leave that morning until they do some work. I'd give them gloves and bags. I've hired homeless guys forever to pick up trash. The third thing is on the illegal dumping and the lot clearing. We know, and Councilman Lewis and I have talked about this, that we changed the definition of blight in the state code. We can actually take blighted properties, and that owner can lose that property. It now is a use, we can use eminent domain if it is blighted. And so now that you are tracking where this is happening, in a much more comprehensive fashion, let's get these repeat offenders out of here. We could make money for the city, sell that property to somebody who will make an investment in it, and get it out of and get it off of your backs and necks to have to try to keep the city in a state that it should be, but is pretty impossible. So those are my, not questions, but quick recommendations.
No, thank you so much, Councilmember Norwood. And I'd like to start with your first concern, which is driver and worker safety. I had the opportunity 3 weeks ago to go out and ride and actually collect trash with a crew. And I was astonished by the disregard for our workers. I rode Moores Mill, Mount Perrin, Wesley, Peachtree Battle, and I had a few near misses. Immediately after that, I reached out to my communications team. We're preparing to do a video with ATL 26 to just promote awareness of our folks that are working on the right-of-way. We're in the process of reaching out to the Solid Waste Association of North America to do a joint campaign about driver and worker safety as well. In addition to that, Mr. Morris Diggs with Fox 5 last night did a story highlighting the dangers that our employees face on a daily basis as they are in direct competition with vehicular traffic. So that is on the forefront of our minds, and we're also looking to put signage on our trucks to provide instructions of how to maneuver around vehicles while they are actually working.
And and Commissioner, I know I'm interrupting you, but when the horn blows, it's when they're scared. They blow the horn to say, wait a minute, we're here. We need just a quick public relations that says, when the horn blows, stop. You will be endangering, or you may kill one of our workers. Let's have something like that. And I love Channel 26. It doesn't reach what we need to reach. I love the fact that Morris has already done that. But a PSA that is a 20-second, 15-second PSA that the stations will play. They won't play something longer than that, but they'll play something that shows a worker almost being killed and a quick tagline. So if we can do that, that would be great. I know I interrupted you. I'm sorry.
Yes, ma'am, noted. Your second item is to, develop some type of initiative to employ the unsheltered. That's something that we would definitely have to run through the Department of Law and the Mayor's office to determine the best course of action for that. Your third point involving the seizure of blighted properties, that would fall under APD code enforcement. Our code enforcement team primarily handles issues that are on the public right-of-way, but we will certainly mention that to Director Talley and her team to see what their position is on that matter as well.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you.
First, I want to say thank you to Councilmember Norwood for her work with the state legislator to get a little power in our city. And I know she just brought it up a little earlier about the lot clearing. Lot clearing is new for us in the city. We're not talking about taking Antonio Lewis's grandma's house. We're talking about these large Maynard 3. We're talking about these large apartment complexes that have just they're nuisance to our entire community. When you think about Pavilion Place on Cleveland Avenue, I'm seeing every week they're in court for a different thing. And I'm walking through the apartments. They say they fixed it up, but I walked through. And so I'm able to walk through that shortcut because they say they fixed that gate. That gate was never fixed. Where all that trash is that we all step over, and I did an interview with Morris Diggs. He followed me through. So he actually has it on camera where you can see that they didn't fix it up. They followed me through the shortcut into Pavilion Place. And so I would like to see us work closer with our solicitor's office because Pavilion Place been like that for at least 10 years. And that's gangland. It's gangland. We call it gangland. You go in there if you want to join a gang. So the things that are going on, I got about 3 apartment complexes that we know what's going on in there. And to make it safer, we need new ownership. I truly appreciate when you think about reaching across the aisle. Councilmember Norwood worked with some Republicans in the State House to push this legislation that's going to help some young folks in the city of Atlanta. So I would like to see us use that, similar to how we've used previously before we put in moratoriums, before we did other things we highlighted it, similar to how we used tearing down single families homes. I want to see some apartment complexes not be torn down, not turn into, my goal is to not close them down, but to try to get better cooperation from the ownership, or if need be, with the powers vested in us by the state to actually take action. And I like Pavilion Place and Maynard 3 to be the first 2 folks that we let them know that now we have a different plan. Also, one last thing, is there a way for us to find out who gets fined what? What I mean by that is and I don't know the maximum fine, you can tell me that. The maximum fine for if we're code enforcement violation for an apartment building like Pavilion Place. Like, are we fining them $20 a day, $50 a day, or are we doing $1,000 a day?
So, Councilmember Lewis, the maximum fine is $1,000 per day for each occurrence, right? So for each violation, the violator can be cited up to $1,000 per day for each violation.
Okay, and I don't know who can find that number out. I would like to know if somebody, I've seen Councilmember Bone do this before. Can someone find out what we are finding Pavilion Place for their issues? Because I want to know, how do we decide what we find folks? Because $20 a day for an apartment complex with 500 apartments, and the other one, he owns 3 of them in my district, but the other one 500 apartments, but $20 per day, and I got people calling, they don't stop calling me. Because they never called the council member before in their life. And so they think I'm their friend too. And so they're calling me and the relationship is turning from friendly to mean and back to friendly because I'm nice the entire conversation. But I understand fully when you got rats running through you know what it looks like when a rat was there. You don't got to see the rat because you see the messings that they drop. And so I'm trying to figure out how can we use the powers in that 20, and how do we decide, my question is, how do we decide how much, who decides if we find $20 or $1,000? And my question to the folks who could find this out, how much are we finding? Or if we can't tell that out loud, how much are we finding Pavilion Place?
So, Councilmember Lewis, without speaking on the behalf of the solicitor's office is the city's prosecution arm. And so they will make a decision on the amount of the fine based on previous history or the level of the violation. Some violations do have a minimum fee, but that latitude is with the prosecution arm as far as making a recommendation and the judge with upholding that recommendation. But we will certainly share those concerns that you have with APD Code Enforcement, Director Talley. We do partner with APD Code Enforcement when they request a lot to be cleared. And so we are very diligent with collecting the amount of staff hours that are involved with cutting those lots, and so that we can place the appropriate liens against the property when we use taxpayer dollars to perform that work.
Okay, I want to say thank you for all the work you've been doing in District 12. I want to say thank you for just being innovative with ways in which we've been able to do stuff. I want to say thank you for being a direct communicator to some of my constituents to questions I can't answer. And so I appreciate the staff of DPW, and I don't think that the city of Atlanta works. I used to say firemen into policemen, but policemen are disrespected in the city. So I say the city of Atlanta does not work until the trash man is treated like the fireman. And so that's the kind of respect we want. We want the That's how we want to do, and I appreciate you for pushing that forth. But the city does not work until the trash man is treated like the fireman. Thank you.
Councilmember Lewis, we certainly appreciate and feel your support, so thank you again.
Thank you. President Shipman.
Thank you. Commissioner and team, thanks for being here. Appreciate it. Just had a few clarifying questions and then a couple of topics I wanted to raise briefly. When we're talking about the study by the end of the year, is it one study that includes both the rate study and the operations, or are there two studies that need to happen? A specific rate study that was contemplated when we passed the change in the way that we were doing the funding, and then an operational study. Is it one study or two? I'm just trying to make sure.
So if I understand you correctly, it's a comprehensive approach. The rate study is a result of examining the services that we perform, the cost of those services, identifying any efficiencies in our current best management practices and how we deploy our resources and staff. And the rate study is a result of, here is the actual cost of the services that you provide, and here is what we should be charging the end user for those services.
Got it. Okay, that helps clarify. I had a specific question about bike lanes and bike lane maintenance and sweepers, and I'm not sure if this falls under y'all or ATL, DOT. I'm going to ask them about it tomorrow. But could you talk a little bit about that? Do we have a plan? Because I understand that our current sweepers don't really fit in our bike lanes.
So that's a great question. We have been in the process of conducting demonstrations for various street sweepers. We haven't found one that we particularly like, that we feel that is that provides some level of sustainable use. Therefore, we are really clearing those areas manually with backpack blowers and what we call billy goats, the push-operated blowers. We understand that it looks a little archaic, but again, once you purchase these capital pieces of equipment, our goal is to make sure that we can find equipment that will actually meet the need of those bike lanes. And all bike lanes aren't created equally. Some have barricades that provide restrictions that where we can't get a traditional sweeper. And then if that street sweeper is capable of maneuvering through those areas, it may be a street sweeper that cannot be driven from the barn. It may need to be trailered. So again, the logistics of deploying those pieces of equipment, we want to make sure that, again, we're beginning all processes with an end in mind. There are street sweepers that probably would work for a short period of time. There are street sweepers that would probably clear the bike lanes, but the logistics of getting that equipment out would be pretty brutal. And we have that problem throughout the city with street sweeping related activities.
So just so I'm clear, the budget as it is presented contemplates cleaning those lanes, but not through the acquisition of a sweeper in this fiscal year, still through the manual processes?
So we have acquired street sweepers that will accommodate some bike lanes, but not all bike lanes. And so there will be remaining bike lanes that we do need to clear manually, but this budget does take account for that.
Got it. Another thing that we talked about before is automated mowing equipment, potentially looking at some of that. I just wanted to see an update on acquisition of those. I know you've been testing different technologies. If you've landed on one, and again, if this budget contemplates capital acquisitions yet or along those lines.
Right, so our first automated mower is scheduled to arrive
In June.
in June, so any day now, basically. Please keep in mind, those automated mowers aren't used for beautification purposes. They just eradicate grass. So those automated mowers will be used on areas that are off the beaten path. Now, the areas where we want to provide that landscape touch, we won't use those automated mowers. They're primarily used near interstates where we have severe slopes or areas where we just aren't comfortable with putting our workers in harm's way. A great example would be the island at Marietta Street and Northside Drive. It's very difficult to get to that area. We won't be using automated mowers in that area. We actually have a wildflower planting project there, so we won't have to walk across our workers won't have to walk across to that area.
Do we have an expectation of how many of those we might have in this fiscal year budget?
So we have 1 up to 2. We really want to understand how practical
Test
the
case,
use
so
of
we're
this
still in
more.
pilot mode?
Yes, sir.
Fair enough. I want to talk just for a moment about fleet. You mentioned that that one of the 24 priorities was around continuing to move towards 20% of fleet being EVs. I just wanted to ask, one, around the timing expectation around meeting that goal, and two, if we are also in conjunction to that, looking at alternative fuels that would be less carbon intensive, clean diesel types of fuels or other sort of biodiesel types of fuels, is that a step that you see reducing our carbon emissions instead of just either traditional versus EV?
No, so that's a great question. As far as our rollout for electric vehicles, we're working closely with the Mayor's Office of Resilience. We recently put a project charter together to engage all of our departments. Our biggest challenge is public safety, right? Electric vehicles aren't always practical for the work that they perform. And so we're working again closely with the Atlanta Department of Transportation and even the Atlanta Department of Watershed Management. We're really looking to identify vehicles that meet our budget guidelines. We use a lot of pickup trucks, and for passenger vehicles and smaller SUVs, we can find reasonably priced vehicles as it relates to electric vehicles. But just for the sake of an example, the Ford Lightning pickup truck, we're getting quotes in the area of 70 to 100K, and that's just not sustainable from a budget perspective right now. But our focus has been preparing the infrastructure for the use of electric vehicles. Number one, Chief Farley is doing a great job of working with outside contractors to identify areas of the city for both public and private use for the installation of those charging stations. But for other alternative fuel vehicles, we're looking at them on a case-by-case basis. We have CNG vehicles for our garbage trucks. Although it is an alternative fuel source, there are some limitations that come with those vehicles. We have to reduce the crew sizes. That truck will only allow safely 2 people in that truck, and so a traditional combustion engine vehicle will allow for 3 people. So when we have inclement weather, we have to send someone out to go transport the person who is on the back of the truck. So we're looking at it holistically. Our goal is to make sure that we're not doing what's trending. We're doing things that actually are cost effective and yield long-term benefits.
And I want to piggyback on Commissioner Wiggins as well a little bit as we look at alternative fuels and trending. As we are having those discussions as we look internally as well. Say, for example, hydrogen, for example. Although we're not looking at that's down the road, but when we think about EVs, we do understand that there's a certain capacity for the grid can handle for EVs. I know that's a concern in other states around the country. Like if you look at California, which is the largest automobile market, which cannot take on a huge amount of EVs. So that's something that we're constantly having discussions internally, but that's, some time out. But those are things that are still, we're forward-looking as well as for the department. So I just wanted to add that in there, too.
I'd love to follow up offline on some of these conversations. The last question I have is just to return a little bit to Councilmember Hillis's question. If we look at this budget the way it's constructed, a very simple question, it may be a complex answer. Should we expect that the service levels for residents that they see on a day-to-day basis, what gets cut, what gets picked up, if somebody misses, how quickly somebody comes back to pick it up, should we expect those service levels to remain the same?
No, you should expect for them to increase and improve.
So the budget and the shortfalls and such that we've been talking about, the moves that you're having to make financially, you don't anticipate are going to decrease the service delivery to residents?
No, we actually expect for services to improve. We take complete ownership if there are some pretty gross inefficiencies that we have corrected over the last 6 to 8 months, and adding the data team has exposed things that really weren't on our radar. And adding twos and the implementation of AI is another tool. The development of the mobile application to score our vendors. We learned that after we had our QA/QC team investigating or inspecting the work that was done by the contractors, that we weren't receiving maximum value in return for the invoices for services that we receive. And so we've somewhat slowed down the work that's being performed by the contractors. The cost reduction, there is a cost reduction that comes along with that, but we're learning that we need to also consider adding additional contractors into our landscape provider networks, and we're leveraging one of our greatest benefits as a city, which is scale. We recently engaged the Atlanta Beltline. We don't provide maintenance for the Atlanta Beltline, but we ask that they consider adding their scope of work as a bid alternative, because when that work is done or bidded out collectively, the unit price is reduced. And so, President Shipman, we're not shy about asking for additional funding. I am shy about asking for funding that I can't clearly articulate why the request is made. I don't want to, pigeonhole, rat hole funding unless it's absolutely necessary. There will always be a need for, additional services. But again, my team can recite this, is that performance and innovation is at the forefront of what we do. We're always looking to build a better mousetrap, and we're seeing those results. And we're happy to share. We would love for you to come and visit the command center and the staff that we have recently hired. We've hired some of the brightest and best minds to help us collect data. So we're pretty excited about it. Our goal is to always underpromise and overdeliver. So I'm confident that you will be pleased with the progress, not only the progress that we have made over the last 12 months. I think you will be proud to see our plans for the upcoming years.
Great. Well, I appreciate the disposition of trying to look for efficiencies. That real kudos. Last question. We know that if we get into a situation where our retention or our ability to hire goes down, that services suffer. We saw it during COVID, right? We know that human capital is just crucial to this department's functioning. Do you feel confident in the construction of this budget that you have the right levels of compensation and the right levels of investment in human talent that will allow you to maintain retention and hiring rates to keep everything running, to back to those service delivery levels that we just talked about?
And I do, President Shipman, and I'll tell you why. Even in the COVID environment, we had to deal with the force majeure, with even our contractors who weren't able to provide the staffing and the resources that we needed. We did not experience any complications as we engaged the mayor's office or the Department of Finance when we asked for emergency funding for those purposes. But our goal is to prepare for that storm, right? We're putting, our storm shelters in place through automation. That the automated side-loaded trucks will allow us to, again, autonomously perform the work with a single operator. So in every area that we could really reduce our vulnerability to such an event in the future, we're exploring those areas.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
All right, Councilmember Winston, before you start, I just want to acknowledge that Watershed is in the space. You see that we're running late, but we will catch up, have y'all come up as soon as we wrap our questions. But Councilmember Winston, followed by Councilmember Bakhtiari.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Commissioner Wiggins and DPW team for being here today. I did want to talk about the reallocation of dollars from contractual services to personnel, and I know you kind of went through that process, and I completely understand that we're trying to cut back on some of the contractual services, and it makes sense to be able to allocate those dollars to personnel and salaries. You're still at about a $6 million gap between where the contractual services were and the personnel numbers. To me, it seems like some of those dollars could go towards capital outlays, especially if you've talked a lot about the need for more equipment. And I just want to get the thought process of not not reallocating some of those dollars towards some of the capital expenditures that you all need?
So another great question. Again, the capital, the procurement of capital items is tricky, just the availability. We have not had any challenges, again, with the mayor's office or the Department of Finance when we have discovered that there may have been an order from another jurisdiction that they weren't able to honor and meet their commitment. We have gone and asked for funding for additional capital equipment without any resistance. We have received funding in those areas, but our request is based on the availability of that equipment. One of the things that we have not completely resolved, and we're hoping that the cost and efficiency study will do this for us, is to understand the delta between purchasing the automated side-loaded trucks and possibly liquidating some of our existing fleet to purchase additional automated equipment. So there is value in our existing fleet that we could leverage to purchase additional equipment, which, by the way, in this current environment, surplusing equipment is at a premium. They're paying an all-time high for that equipment. We recently partnered with the Department of Procurement to list our items through a auction provider. And so we're looking to see what type of funds we collect by liquidating some of our equipment that has exceeded its life cycle. And the next wave of that is to begin liquidating equipment that's closely approaching the expiration of its life cycle and to reinvest those funds back into the respective account to purchase additional capital.
Okay, because I know, there's some different pieces of equipment that come to mind, for instance, the cameras that we could, fully utilize to be able to go after enforcement for illegal dumping throughout the city. Council President mentioned our bike lane enforcement. One of the line items that I had in our budget was to look at look at equipment to be able to clean our bicycle, and especially protected bike lanes, which are so hard to get into with equipment. And it just seems like this would be a ripe opportunity to maybe be able to reallocate some of those dollars back into capital expenditures to be able to use it for some of these type of expenses. So, just something that I think that, we could take a very hard second look at and see if that's something that we could do. It brings me to another thought that I've had, just kind of thinking about Councilmember Hillis and his line of questioning is around the shortfalls that we've had around our fund balance. It almost seems that, and I'm careful about how I say this because I don't want the public to think that I'm thinking that we need to try to get more dollars out of them, but a chief revenue officer seems like it could be someone that could be within DPW to really look at how we maximize the dollars and making sure that we're making up for the expenditures and maximizing the revenue within the department year after year. I'm thinking about our conversation a couple of weeks ago in city utilities where, if you got folks with multiple trash cans, and I'm not saying they shouldn't have those, but we should make sure that we're collecting the dollars because it's going to cost us extra resources to be able to collect those. So, if someone is willing to pay an extra $70 to be able to get an extra recycling bin or an extra, garbage bin, then why not? But we need to be going after those dollars and making sure the city's receiving the funding that we need to be able to be sustainable, have this fund being able to maintain itself without dipping into our general fund dollars. So I don't know what your thoughts are about that.
No, we're in alignment, Deputy Commissioner Robinson and his team, through the structure of the documents for the cost and efficiency study. One of the areas that we're looking at is to expand our services maybe into some commercial areas that we aren't currently servicing. The use of roll-off containers and maybe having some exclusive agreements with waste haulers as we deploy those types of equipment. In addition to that, one of our goals is to expand into the commercial market to really get a better understanding of the amount of waste that's leaving our city. We don't have a good understanding because some of those services are provided by commercial waste haulers. So as it relates to our solid waste management plan and our zero waste initiatives, we really need to get a better understanding. And so that is part of the cost and efficiency study, but I totally agree with you. We take the solid waste fund very seriously. Our inside slogan is that we're running a business just so happens to be a government. And so we understand that we have to be self-sustaining, and we hate having the conversations about revenue shortfall, and we're very excited about the cost and efficiency study because we feel like this is an opportunity for us to showcase our skills and just to show that government employees, we are innovative, we are cost conscious, and we are able to manage complex issues. So we're in alignment with you. We're hoping that through this service that's provided, by the way, the firm that will conduct the cost and efficiency study has a lot of our legacy data, so there won't be a lot of build-up time for them to collect data to continue the work that has already been done.
Okay. And then I want to talk about yard waste collection. I know we're on a every other week schedule right now, and I can't really speak for my colleagues about how this is going citywide, but I know in District 1 we've had instances where now we've had an overabundance of yard waste, and so, you've got bags that, paper bags that have been sitting for a couple of weeks, they're breaking, or I've had instances where constituents have reported that the trucks are too full to be able to pick up everything that's on their route, and then they're continuing to wait for several weeks. So, tying this back to the budget, it seems that, if we are going to continue with this schedule, then there's opportunities to make sure that we're getting more equipment out there, that it can be able to handle this increased capacity of yard debris that we're going to see. And our city is growing. So, expecting, more tonnage of yard debris, of garbage, of recycling. And so making sure that we have the equipment to be able to handle the amount of growth that the city is going to happen. And maybe this goes back to this cost study, but to me, it seems like something that needs to be tackled right now.
So more so than the cost study, we're looking at the telematics software program. Two major challenges that we have are we have a few areas that participate in our yard waste collection program more than others. Your district is one of them, and Buckhead is a super user, we call, of yard debris disposal. One of the challenges that we have had is to stay on track with yard debris collections in those areas. We have collected yard waste out of our normal cycle, right? We have every other week collections. I'd like to say that way because sometimes biweekly can be confusing to the customer. But that causes a level of confusion when we are out collecting during those off-cycle weeks. We are working with our comms team to provide better messaging, to say this is an off-cycle week. However, crews may be in your area to stay ahead of yard debris collections. And so I personally take responsibility for any confusion that's caused by us trying to stay on schedule. We also have a huge problem with commercial landscapers that are placing yard debris bags out for services that they are paid to provide. The code specifically speaks to commercial landscapers that they are not allowed to dispose of yard debris at the taxpayer's expense. And so it's a huge challenge to regulate because once the bags are out, it's not what you know, it's what you can prove. So sure. We don't know who put the bags out there, but that does come with a significant effort and cost to collect 20 or 30 yard debris bags, right? Because a commercial provider will put 20 or 30 bags out, but the average homeowner will not do that. And so that is another one of our challenges again. And so we're working through our solid waste education enforcement team to provide public education to our customers to notify them that their commercial landscapers should be collecting debris. And we also have offered to allow them to bring the yard waste to our yard debris transfer station free of charge, right? So we've tried to meet them halfway to incentivize that we can reduce the cost of that portion of our
Okay.
operation.
And that brings me to, back to the enforcement side of it, because if we got commercial landscapers that, I would say probably only a small percentage are actually putting them in bags. We got watershed up next, but, we've got landscapers that are simply blowing leaves into our stormwater drains. And so that's creating a whole nother issue, for the city of Atlanta. And I'm seeing that happening a lot as well.
Well, which is a pet peeve of mine also, Councilmember Winston. Our quality assurance and quality control officers have been sworn to be able to write citations for those very issues. So not only do we have our solid waste education enforcement team working on those issues, but our quality assurance, quality control officers, if they haven't already, they're meeting with the solicitor's office to be authorized to write citations for those type of issues as well.
Okay, and lastly, I just wanted to touch on the point Council President made about the EV expansion, especially as it pertains to our fleet. It seems like, and maybe this is an admin question, not necessarily for Public Works, but an expansion of the EV charging network is the only way I see that this is going to work. We can have all the EVs we want, but if we don't have a place to charge them and actually make them functional so that they can, be able to be used across the city, then, this program is not going to be a success. So I just want to make sure that that's something that's part of this conversation. There's only 2 around City Hall, and 1 is not even functional now. So, how are we going to see this working if if we're not even doing it right here at City Hall?
Right, well, it's a great question. The Mayor's Office of Resilience and the Department of Enterprise and Asset Management are working closely together. And we are giving them feedback as we purchase electric vehicles as well. So they, and as well as our Governmental Affairs Director, Ms. Kenyatta Mitchell, is aggressively going after grant opportunities to install EV charging stations as well. But as you know, there is a challenge with retrofitting existing infrastructure to install EV charging stations, and so they're maneuvering around that also.
Okay. And lastly, I just want to again thank the women and men of DPW for your hard work, your dedication. I know this job is grueling. I know it is sometimes thankless, but we all just want you to know that, we appreciate the hard work and dedication that you bring to the city each and every day. You have the full support of the City Council, and we want to make sure that you're compensated the right way, that you have all the tools and resources that you need to be able to do your job on a day-to-day basis. So again, just thank you all for your hard work. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Winston.
Hey, Commissioner.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Everyone has already pretty much taken all the questions. But I just had a quick one on, I know we mentioned the study that y'all are doing that Council President touched on that you said will be done by the end of the calendar year. I also wanted to ask about the one that I legislated last year about essentially like the in-depth piece on the line items to see if we could streamline efficiencies.
So that was baked into, that's all one study. It's the cost and efficiency study. I know when you were on the CUC committee, you led that charge to make sure that we had the opportunity to evaluate our
And as you
day-to-day
see,
practices.
as you can see, I was punished. I was removed from CUC.
No, we appreciate your assistance with that. And so the initial ask was for us to come back in March with an update. We provided a full update to the CUC explaining that we finalized the process and that the work should begin, again, within the next 30 days. The vendor is telling us that they expect to be able to complete the work by December. As I mentioned earlier, I prefer to underpromise and overdeliver. My promise is not that it will be completed by December as much as my promise is that we will have the information, we will push them to have the information before we begin the FY25 budget prep. I think even with them having the legacy data, it's still a very aggressive timeline.
Yes.
But we're milestone driven and execution driven, and so we will definitely stay on top of them at every milestone and make sure that each stage of this project is completed.
Understood. And I was going to also ask about, I don't know if someone had touched upon this already, maybe Councilmember Hillis, but retention, have retention rates gone up, or have we improved on that front with hiring and actually retaining employees?
So the ongoing challenge is always with our solid waste collections division. I think we're hovering in the 7%, not retention, at loss range.
Okay, 7% retention, we get.
Right, which is commensurate with industry standard, right? And I'm proud to say that Deputy Commissioner New and his team have done a great job of poaching some of the best talent in the metro area from other jurisdictions, which means that we do have something attractive to offer. One of the things that I have done is to create a Commissioners Advisory Board. These are DPW team members, grade 19 and below. Yep. We have a vice chairman and a chairman, and they advise me on things that relate to morale or safety, or whether it's awards, and that's been very helpful for me to hear directly from the folks that are on the ground performing work, what their work experience is with working with the Department of Public Works.
Understood. And I know I asked this, I feel like I asked this, I'm not sure if I asked it of you, I've asked it from some of the commissioners, but do you happen to know off the top of your head if or how many DPW employees live within the city?
I don't know that number. Ms. Davis did the study a while ago. It was less than 20%, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, we have to get back to you on that.
I'm asking because I think it would be good for us to know, because to understand what our employees, as Councilmember Winston said, like, you all work extraordinarily hard. I've actually asked the commissioner if I could ride on back of one of the garbage trucks, and he told me absolutely not, because he thinks I would die, which apparently means that I need to get out and like hit a treadmill or run or something, because he's telling me that I'm horrifically out of shape. So he just says it's very grueling. So again, kudos to you all. I have attempted to try and joining you for collections, and he said no. Which, I'm going to go ahead and take his advice. But that being said, because of what the employees go through, for us to be able to understand how many of our foundational employees that the city would not run without are having to travel into the city to do a job that keeps them up from God knows what hour to what end, so that we have a better understanding of what our employees are going through and where we need to understand, like, if we can't, as Commissioner Smith said earlier, getting everyone a pay raise is difficult, but there's other things that we can do. We can't just say, oh, sorry, we only have this much budget, can't pay you more, but maybe we can look at housing opportunities like we are doing with our officers. Maybe we can look at other things. And so having a better understanding of those numbers will, one, give us a better understanding, but give me stronger ground to advocate from and to work with you all on. And yeah, go ahead.
No, I'm sorry. I was just going to say we, not I, are in alignment with that. Even going out periodically and me getting on the back of a truck, it doesn't give me a indication of what they deal with.
How long do you last on the back of the truck?
I did a day this time, and so.
Can you define a day? Is that like an hour?
I didn't return the next day. I went back to the office, but I will tell you that working on the back of the truck is, I don't care how good of a shape you're in, it's a different type of workout.
I'll pay anybody for that video footage if you have it.
Listen, I intentionally told my comms team to not come out. We didn't have any cameras, so yeah. Now, I think I did a pretty good job. I'm not going to tell you how tired I was when I actually got home, but yeah, I was able to make it through a day. I think they took it a little bit easy on me.
Must say they probably did.
Right.
Did you slow down pickups that day? No, thank you, Commissioner. And then the last thing I will ask is just if there's an opportunity to get a calendar of street sweeping. I want to be able to tell folks when it's coming so they can get their cars out the way. Right. And so if we can just, I noticed again the other week that there was someone coming down my street and I had no clue. So I would love to get ahead of that by getting a calendar and making sure that, like, we're working with y'all to make sure that's, especially in the fall, when we have all those leaves in the street cluttering drains and things like that, just so we can, one, properly match it so we can give feedback, and two, to have a heads up so that we can notify people that it's coming so the neighborhoods can prepare, so y'all can actually do your jobs and get out, so we can get out the way.
Absolutely. And just so you know, we're working with our comms team to add additional signage that we can place on utility poles and other areas to provide better notification of street sweeping in advance of our arrival.
And if you don't mind me asking, what is our current frequency for street sweeping, if you don't mind me asking?
So we try to hit every street once a quarter, and our major thoroughfares are, is it the same rhythm for our major thoroughfares once a quarter? Okay.
Okay. Thank you. I'll probably follow up later on cost of if frequency went up in certain areas. I won't ask that now because I can feel Councilmember Juan's eyes in the back of my head. So I'm gonna let that one go, and I'll follow up with you on that one later. Thank you all.
All right, and we have one final, very, very, very quick question from Councilmember Hillis. Very quick.
Let me think for just a minute. Thank you, Chairman Juan. Now you're making me lose my train of thought. On the issue I brought up earlier with right-of-way maintenance, I know we still have these emergency contracts. What is the plan moving into fiscal year 24 for arterials, collectors, and local streets?
Another question. I'll make it quick, Chairman Juan.
Take all the time.
So our plan is to have that bid package out by, is it July? Yeah. July of this year. And as I mentioned earlier, we've added some bid alternatives such as the Atlanta Beltline. One of the things that's commonly misunderstood is that the Department of Public Works does not maintain medians or areas near interstate on or off ramps. And so that's currently under the watch of the Atlanta Department of Transportation. And so they're transferring, we're in the process of renegotiating them transferring the funding and resources for that service over to the Department of Public Works to streamline those duties. As you know, Commissioner Cavanis has hit the ground running. He has a lot of capital projects and transportation and design-related projects. We want to help him to get out of the area of doing transactional work and for us to assist him in that area. But we anticipate that with that bid package, that work that ADOT has been responsible for before, we will add that into DPW's bid package.
Yeah. And when I said DOT, I meant GDOT specifically. So how are you and Commissioner Cavanis attempting to hold GDOT accountable for their right-of-ways, whether it's our city surface streets? I go home down I-20 West, and you can see about 5% of the interstate signage, even on I-20. And then we won't even talk about our local surface streets that are state routes and the interstate exits, as you mentioned. They're not doing their job.
So we're scheduled to meet with GDOT next week, I believe, to discuss that very issue. But even when the work is being performed according to their maintenance schedule, it does not meet our standard. Right, yeah, it's every 60 days, I believe. And that just won't work for the city of Atlanta. So we're prepared to work with them, whether it means that they assist us with funding to maintain those areas that they may have available with the application of growth inhibitors that will at least slow down the growth. So the maintenance won't be as intensive. But that meeting is scheduled next week. As you know, we have several state routes and areas that we maintain as a city because we just can't allow certain things to occur within the city limits that doesn't meet our standard.
Okay, well, in that meeting, if you have any tips of how to get GDOT to respond to emails about these issues, then please share them with me and my colleagues because they haven't been doing that. But thank you for your work and your team's work.
All right, I appreciate Councilmember Hillis being brief because it made room.
Yeah, I just wanted to make the comment. 20 years ago, we signed an agreement, the city signed an agreement with GDOT for GDOT to give money to the city. It was $350,000 for us to hire, and we did through Georgia Works, people who could use that work to clean the interstate exit ramps, and the state roads inside the city limits. 300,000 went to those workers to do that work, and then 50,000 was for us to the city to repair a state road if there were a problem, because they didn't want to have to send a crew inside the city limits for a state road. What ended up happening in the year that that contract was active is there never was something that they needed to ask the city's public works department to go fix, because their roads are in much better shape than city roads. So that is something that they did and was approved, and that might be an angle for us to get to get work for underemployed individuals through a state and get all the interstate ramps and all the state roads cleaned, and they were really cleaned because that was an every week rotation.
Thank you.
All right, that ends our questions. Commissioner, I think you phrased it very well at the beginning. I think we get the luxury of being able to do our jobs from a climate-controlled environment. Your team is out there in the elements every day, no matter what it is, to make sure that they're delivering. And the public, it's one of the things the public first sees. So I add my voice to express to you, your leadership, and the team. Please keep up the good work. And we look forward to kind of all the different innovative and things that are going to come from the work y'all and data y'all are collecting. So thank you.
Thank you, Chairman White.
All right, colleagues, we're going to quickly now transition as they get off the stage. We'll pull Watershed up. We're about 30 minutes behind now, so hopefully let's just keep plowing forward. And Watershed, if you have your presentation copies, please give those to Ms. Lindo over there. We have them already somewhere.